Welcome to the Conscious Resistance Live, episode number 82. This week, in the war on drugs, which for some reason continues into 2018, cannabis is in danger. Apparently, the warmongers in charge want to go to war with Iran, concluding a plan they've had for some time. We're also going to talk a little bit about iboga, about psychiatric medicine, and much, much more. All this today on the Conscious Resistance Live. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right. Welcome back to the Conscious Resistance Live, episode 82. My name is Derrick Broze, and you are listening to Watching the Conscious Resistance Network here on Facebook Live, which is, I guess, our platform for the moment. It's definitely not our preferred platform. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But first of all, if you're tuned in, you're watching on the Mind Unleashed, you're watching on Wake Up News, or one of our other channels, please do comment below wherever you're listening from. Let people know where you're tuned in. I'm in Houston, so if you're listening from Orlando, Florida, comment below. And if you see somebody else who's near you, comment to them. Say, hey, let's get together. Let's work on projects. Let's build something better in our community. I do apologize if there's a bit of frames dropping. We had some problems last week, but we're going to continue, and hopefully it'll get better as it goes on. But yeah, go ahead and comment below. Let people know where you're listening from. You can also share this out if you're a part of any groups or any pages that you admin that you think might enjoy a rundown of the news. What we do here on the Conscious Resistance Live, we talk about consciousness, we talk about spirituality, philosophy, politics, solutions, and I am the host here. I'm also here with my two buddies. Let's check you guys out, Johnny and Jeffer from the Freethinker House.
How's it going, y'all?
And we are...
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So we're going to get into a lot of topics today. Yeah, let's talk about that first before we go anywhere. New Year. What did we do on New Year?
On New Year's, we made some vision boards.
Vision boards.
Hung out, had some dinner.
What'd you do, Jeff? Anything fancy?
Nope. Vision boards, fancy dinner. It was just a very chill.
Cuddled.
It's been very cold here in Houston, so yeah. Johnny and Jeff will be joining us again in just a bit once we get into some of the other stories. They're hanging out with us, running the boards for us today, so we're thankful to them. And again, thank you to everyone who's tuned in, sharing this out, giving us likes. If you can hear this, if this is coming through okay for you right now, give us some thumbs up across the screen. Give us some hearts. Give us some kind of, let me know you're alive out there. Anything would be thankful. I see, okay, Washington State. What's up, Jeffer and Johnny? Happy New Year, Colorado. Cool. All right, so people are hearing us. And thank you guys again for sharing this. So the top stories of the day that we're going to get into, we're going to talk about the latest war on cannabis. We're going to talk about the United States possibly intervening, the potential intervening in Iran based on recent protests out there. We're going to talk about a neuroscientist looking into what's known as the Sanskrit effect. That's a pretty interesting story. We're going to talk about iboga. We're going to talk about psychiatric medicine. Quite a few different things, but the first couple of stories I want to mention, the first one actually is we're going to run through, has to do with Facebook. And the reason I want to start with this one, it's fun to take a shot at Facebook every now and then because, well, obviously I'm using the platform currently, but I did try earlier today to get on dlive.io. Check this out. Now, for those of you who are listening and you listen to news programs, you're aware of technology, you're able to use, obviously, Facebook Live, things like that. You might not be aware, but there are a lot of platforms out there that are decentralized and they're giving people options to share information, to have a social network, but without doing it in the way that Facebook does it, which is, for one, we know that Facebook has very close relationships to the U.S. government and governments around the world, and they are very willing to hand over your private information to governments and cops if they suspect you of doing some wrong, right? Maybe those are some legitimate cases, maybe they're not. I think there's plenty of times when they're not. Also, as I talked about last week, until last week, I was off Facebook for about 2 months because, well, it's a sort of spiritual retreat for me. It's good for my sanity, good for my health. And that has been confirmed by a number of studies which have shown that people using Facebook are coming away with depression, with feelings of envy and dissatisfaction, things of that sort, based on their experience on Facebook. Not just using the internet, but with Facebook in general. And of course, it's a tool like anything else, but it does seem to be a tool that, as I said, they're connected with the government. Maybe they're not the most healthy for our spirits or our mind. And this story here is another reason why perhaps we should abandon Facebook, things like YouTube, where there's lots of censorship, Twitter, etc., and go towards platforms like Steemit and Steemit.com. Check that one out. I've made a couple $1,000 in cryptocurrency and cashed out US dollars that we've turned and donated. $800 of that went to a local organization that focuses on survivors of human trafficking, and that came through using Steemit, social media platform. All right. After 10 years of using Facebook and giving them my time, my energy, lots of likes, comments, articles, etc., I never made a dime. And in fact, Facebook wanted me to pay them to be able to reach people. So now I use Steemit for 2 months, and I'm making a couple $1,000, and I get to give half of that to organizations that I care about. So check out Steemit, check out DLive. My point is there's alternatives. Okay, I'm kind of getting to a range, but let's get into the story. The story itself has to do with Glenn Greenwald and a recent article he wrote for The Intercept, which, if you don't know, Glenn Greenwald is, of course, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. He writes for The Intercept. He's also one of the journalists who helped us get the Edward Snowden files and expose that whole thing. So he basically is speaking here in this interview, which you can see for yourself. I just wanted to mention it. He gives an interview to Democracy Now! And Amy Goodman, discussing how Facebook has recently been accused of censoring Palestinian activists who protest Israeli occupation. You know, and the Israeli military forces, of course, are, you know, I'm not even going to really dive into Israeli-Palestinian thing right now, but I just want to say that the Israelis are definitely, the military force is quite brutal and fires on unarmed people, Palestinians, quite often. And apparently Facebook has been deleting posts from activists who are talking about that and calling out Israel. And we also know that Israel has a lot of influence all around the world. Countries like the United States and others who have a lot of power themselves sort of, you know, they bow to Israel in a lot of areas. So pretty much anytime you see a president that comes in like Trump and they are pro-Israel, that usually means they're pro-war as well, because Israel wants control of the Middle East, so does Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of geopolitical stuff that maybe we'll talk about in another episode. But my point is, you're not allowed to criticize Israel, because otherwise you're anti-Semitic, you hate Jews, you know, all these sort of things, which maybe some people do so because of that, but there's also individuals who clearly see that, for whatever reason, Israel has a lot of control, they got a lot of power, and they use brutal tactics. And people have been calling that out via Facebook and other social media platforms, and apparently Facebook has been removing that. It says here, Israeli Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked reportedly said in December that Tel Aviv, which is the capital of Israel, had submitted 158 requests to Facebook over the previous 4 months, asking it to remove content that it deemed, quote, incitement, and said that Facebook had granted 95% of the requests. So again, Facebook's working with, like, you know, authoritarian regimes. Jeff, or one of you guys, oh, you got that article in there. Cool, yeah. The article is posted below the video on the Conscious Resistance page if you want to check it out yourself. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Another reason, out of the others I've already gone over, why we should consider Steemit, we should consider DTube, we should consider DLive, and there's others out there. I'm not getting paid by anybody to promote these. I just think they're better tools. And if the internet is to remain free, and if you're worried about what happens because of the loss of net neutrality, well, it's possible that centralization will happen because of governments and corporations working together. But that's only if we choose to stay on these centralized mainstream platforms. You know, if we reject the mainstream music, we reject the mainstream culture, and we reject all the other things, why would we adopt the mainstream form of communication? Like Facebook has 6 billion people, you know, some ridiculous number, 1/6 of the world or more on this one platform that has connections to the NSA, and on and on and on. Forget Facebook. Let's move on. All right. Next story. Cannabis, which is I think that's where we're going, right? Or we go to
No.
Iran first?
I ran first.
Okay, so we're going to do the Iran story. This is an important one because, well, it's scary in a way, because for those who paid attention for, say, the last 5-10 years, and you've heard about, maybe you've heard the name General Wesley Clark, and you've heard about his revelation shortly after 9/11, discussing that there was a plan that the United States had that has been written about by other private institutions. They're called non-governmental organizations, aka modern secret societies. These organizations operate as think tanks, and they operate as, you know, NGOs, and they write white papers about what they would like to see the world like, you know, things like Bilderberg Group, etc. And they talk about these things sort of theoretically, hypothetically, and then for some reason, these people who are, again, connected to politicians, media, and on other forms of power centers, academia, they use their influence to then make the vision become a reality. Call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, or you can go to DTube right now if somebody's put it on there. Or if not, go to YouTube and search General Wesley Clark, 7 Nations, And what he discussed was that after 9/11, in the Bush administration, that he was shown, basically some paperwork saying that they were going to go into 7 countries in the next like 5 years. Obviously, it's taken them a lot longer, but the countries that they discussed: Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, Syria, and then ending up with Iran. So now, what do we all of a sudden hear? What's going on in Iran? Iran, of course, I'm not here to defend anybody, any of the leaders, any of the religious like fundamentalists there. Definitely, the United States has a history of interfering in Iran. If you know the history, in 1953, I believe it was Operation Ajax. The United States, CIA, of course, they had an undercover program, a classified program, and they helped overthrow a democratically elected leader in Iran. And since then, there's been just horrible relations between the two because eventually the people kicked them out. And there's been trouble with the two nations for the last 50 years or so. And Israel is also kind of a part of that. Iran has said that they are going to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. And Israel is claiming we're just trying to defend ourselves. And the United States is trying to, and has been for years, surround Iran and Syria for the purpose of defending, and I guess the Saudi-Israeli partnership. It's the point is to carve up that Middle Eastern region. Some would say for oil, some would say for warfare, other things like that. But my point is that when you look at the history, it's pretty clear that the United States is wanting. Look at the map. Iraq is right to the left of Iran. Afghanistan is right to the right. Then you got Kuwait, you got Turkmenistan, you got Yemen right there. So the United States has already surrounded Iran, and the goal was Syria. Syria, though, they weren't able to fully do it because we were told we need to go in there and destroy and fight ISIS. And by the way, we also need to overthrow their president and install democracy there for them, the same way we've done with everybody else, right? Well, it hasn't worked because Russia is defending Syria, and there's a stalemate there, so we haven't seen that happen. Perhaps, though, now, maybe they're just moving forward and advancing the plan, because what's been happening recently is there have been apparently spontaneous protests taking place around the country, around Iran, and people are sort of speculating like who's involved. This article here that I'm looking at from Zero Hedge looks at a few different pieces of information that says that the U.S. hints at Iran overthrow. Are we witnessing the early stages of the regime change? And then we have another one from the anti-media where U.S. officials say that they have promised support for the people of Iran. So essentially the U.S. military, the people in charge, they see an opportunity. Hey, there's protests happening. If these go mainstream, if these go wide, we could potentially funnel money to them and fund the rebels, right? And overthrow the leaders that we wanted to for 50, 60 years, and maybe get in a more Western-friendly leader. And that would basically be the completion of the United States, the Western NATO nations taking control of that entire region. And I don't think Russia's going to allow that to happen. I don't think that Iran's just going to stand by and allow it to happen. And of course, there's situations going on with North Korea. My point is here, you start looking into this. Read these articles, the two ones we're sharing here, the overthrow and the one that talks about the U.S. officials promising support for the protesters. And then there's another video after that, if you can get that one. Here, I'll post it myself. It's coming from James Corbett, a good friend who does the Corbett Report. He just did a video that just came out today called "We Need to Talk About Iran." Check that out. I suggest you check that one out. I'm sure it's on YouTube as well. It says we need to talk about the Iran protest. I think you should look into that. I think we need to talk about that. So my goal here is not to claim to know all the answers. I want to make that clear. I'm not a freaking geopolitical expert at all. I've interviewed a lot of different people who I would say are experts, and I've written quite a few articles, and I read a whole lot and things of that sort. But truly, we can never know what another person's motivations are. We can look at the situation, we can understand all the information, we can take that in, and we can make reasonable, educated guesses at best, I would say. We can also, as journalists, we can seek out sources, and we can try to actually find out what's going on behind the scenes, what people won't say publicly, what isn't known publicly, things of that sort. I do hope, and I was thinking about this earlier, if anybody's interested in this, I would like to go to Syria this year. I would like to go report on some of the conflicts over there firsthand and to see what's happening. And I've had a couple of other journalist friends who've gone and who come back and who report the exact opposite of what we hear in the American media. They go there and have very clear evidence that the so-called rebels are actually the terrorists and that the people are terrified of the people the United States have been funding. So my point is to say that these situations, when it comes to geopolitical situations and big things like this, where we're talking about international war with other people in other countries that we have no control over, like we literally have no control over what other people in Iran do, ultimately, what their leaders do, what Kim Jong-un does, what Trump does. We don't have control of that. We have control of our own hearts and our own minds and our own actions, and that's really what it's about. We can spread information. We can work to decentralize and unplug from these systems and stop supporting them financially, morally, through our energy, through our time. That's why I even hesitate to talk about some of these stories. But at the same time, we don't need to be ignorant. We don't. The opposite of ignorance is knowledge, and knowledge, of course, is power. And power is something more than just physical power. It's about awareness. It's about empowering your whole being. And what that means is to become aware of what's going on around you, to take logical and I would say practical and proactive steps following that knowledge and that education. So you learn about the situation. Holy crap, there's something going on in Iran. Holy crap, they're trying to start another war. And you don't like that. You realize it doesn't fit well with you, doesn't suit you in the things that you desire and the world that you want to see. So you ask yourself, how can I stop supporting that? So you find a way to start making money that's not taxed. You find a way to make some money under the table, or to start creating a product that can bring you an income, to become an entrepreneur, and to do so in a way that isn't feeding this machine. You start supporting decentralized forms of not only of social media, but of economics, like cryptocurrency or alternative currencies. You start supporting decentralized tools all around, and before you know it, you realize that there is no need for a government at all, and that you and your community can take care of yourself. These are the things that are possible. These are the realities and the realizations that are possible when one steps outside of that bubble and really starts to pursue solutions. And that starts with being aware of these things. So my point is that we might not know all of the details and exactly what's going to happen, and we might not be able to completely influence it one way or the other, but we can become aware of it, and we can make decisions that are going to actually help us in the long run. And that's the goal here, right? I mean, if you think that the world's going to shit, then you might as well start getting prepared for what's coming after that and how you're going to survive that, how your family's going to. If you look around and you see a really, really beautiful world, a lovely place to be in, and you see no problems, then I guess you won't be motivated to action. But I think if you take an honest look, then you'll see that there's a lot to deal with. Johnny, go ahead and get us started on this cannabis story here. There's this crazy guy named Jeff Sessions. I wrote an article about him when he first got picked by Trump, separate from this issue, just about how this dude also is very much in support of surveillance, and he's helped grow the surveillance state all around. He's just a stand-up guy. But what do we got, man?
I was just showing everyone the article with your shot real quick here. Let's get over to everybody. Hey, guys. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy to see, because we all know in the Obama administration, everyone's very happy to see him actually kind of take a step towards the legalization of marijuana or cannabis, and say that, hey, we're not going to send the DEA agents after the states that have legalized it for themselves. Their citizens voted, and this is a consensus that that's what they want in their states. I've been there. It didn't raise crime rates in Colorado. It didn't really do much negative things. I didn't see people losing their minds on the streets. So it hasn't been there hasn't been reports of violence or any kind of negative changes since then that would give Trump really a reason to go back on this. I just think it's just some petty thing that these old guys are just holding on to, don't smoke weed, kids, please. It's a bad thing, but it's a medicine, and a lot of people use it for that, and a lot of people use it for recreation, which is fine as well. And they're just trying to go back and switch that off, Do
you think this is going to be success? I mean, because basically, for those who haven't heard the story, what Johnny's referencing is some Obama era rules that basically said we won't go in and do these SWAT team raids on dispensaries anymore. And so it's one reasonable thing that Obama did. They were still arrests taking place. I'm not going to say that no arrests were taking place.
It could have even just been to make him look kind of good at the end of his thing. It's oh, Obama helped us out.
Well, he did it sort of in the beginning. That's the thing, is he may have reduced some of it, but I guarantee you, and I know me and Mike have talked about this, and I've reported on this as well, that there were definitely raids still taking place. But he did decrease the amount, at least. Now Trump and his administration and Jeff Sessions are basically saying, no, we're not doing that anymore. They're specifically saying we're gonna spend resources to go after the states that are decriminalizing and legalizing cannabis to start making arrests. They've even talked about trying to prosecute local authorities for not arresting people.
And that's the taxpayers' money that's going to this pointless project. You know, it's something to be thought of.
And we were talking about this before the show earlier, that to me it's interesting because there are some people who, like for example, there's some people who really want to empower the federal government because they believe that all people should have access to healthcare, right? And that may, it may involve a massive increase in the federal government, and maybe in just one particular area. They're like, well, that's only going to be an increase in the area of healthcare, right? But ultimately, it's still the same federal government that is also going to target people for cannabis in this case, or go after people for being illegal immigrants. So it's the same institution. It may have different branches and different pieces, but at the end of the day, it's a part of the same system that is used as a tool for oppressing people. And so I think if you're out there and you're like, well, I want to use the federal government, but only for good purposes, what you consider to be good and what you think other people should be doing, like if you don't think it's good for them to pursue it, to go after drug users or cannabis users or to go after, illegal, undocumented people, then maybe you should rethink the idea of giving them the power to do anything.
Yeah, really. And I always think that, smaller groups of power are always going to be better. So, the states' rights, at least in my opinion, make much more sense than, having this higher up thing, because it's always going to be harder for them to understand the ground level of it. In Colorado, they were able to recognize, the governor was able to recognize, okay, my citizens are smoking, cannabis, and they're using this medicine, and we're going to let them vote for it. Whereas, the president or these guys in Congress or whatever, they don't care about the citizens they're not thinking on that level, you know what I mean?
Well, it's a philosophical difference between, do we want the states to be in charge of things, to have, or even I would say even on a local level. I think if the city of Houston, and to some degree we do have this, and I guess this is what this would change. For example, we're here in Houston, Harris County. Harris County is the second largest county in the country. Lots of people and lots of money going towards locking people up for cannabis until the past year and a half or so, or maybe even 2 years now. They started the first program where it was decriminalized, where you would still get a ticket or something, but at the least they weren't going to take you to jail anymore. And they're like, oh, we just don't have the space to lock people up over silly things like that anymore. So that's okay, cool. On a county level, they decided to do that. I can get down with that. I think maybe even down to the neighborhood level, we should go for that. But down to the county level. So if Jeff Sessions and the Trump administration have their way, they would want to send federal officials here to arrest local officials for not doing what they say that the state should do in the city.
For listening to their people.
For listening to
what they want to do. And that's what I'm saying. There's that, the higher up you go on this chain, the reason localization works so well is because the higher up you go on this chain, the more distance you're putting between the person who's affected by the legislation and the legislators. You know what I mean? So if you actually are forced to see the results of what you're doing out there with all these papers and stuff, because these guys probably just go home and they don't even think twice about it. I bet a bunch of them even smoke weed.
One thing too, I do want to mention this just because in case we possibly have some of these people in the audience, whether this is live or when you're watching later, is that some people, they hear this kind of talk and they're just like, you guys just want to have the ability just to get high and do drugs all the time, right? Well, maybe we do. That's not why I'm arguing for it necessarily, but maybe that is why some people say that. And the truth of the matter is, the crux of it comes down to, it's the fact that people should have the right to do that if they choose to. It's not about that we're sitting here saying we're necessarily going to be smoking weed all day, or just that everybody should just be stoned out of their mind. I definitely think there's a difference between productive stoners and those who are very lazy and sort of stereotypical stoner. But whatever, it's their ability to do that. It should be, at least, because whether you call it natural rights or given by God or however you want to put it, I believe that if we are not free to alter our state of mind, and by that I mean drink a glass of wine or a beer or meditate or any sort of thing, because there's so many different ways to alter your state of mind. It's even been said before that television itself is a drug, essentially, because when you stare at the screen, and especially maybe the internet, the computer, for a long enough time, it changes your brain patterns and your brain waves. In the same ways, exactly, it alters your mind in the same way that a substance of any other kind or a plant or a drug can. So if we don't have the freedom and the ability to alter our state of mind and to have what's called cognitive liberty, can we really be said to be free? If a state, if a government, or somebody else can say, no, you can't change what's going on inside your own head.
It's kind of like saying, I own your body, and I'm going to tell you what you can and can't put in.
It's exactly what
that's because that's how I felt, and most people get it already. I think that it's the general consensus of most people, at least in the little bit of the younger generations, that you know this isn't a harmful plant.
Yeah,
This isn't something that we need to be spending our time and money and really just ruining our citizens' lives over.
well, we've got that poll that we were talking about. So it says there's actually like this is just
Let's
from
see if I
back in
can find
October.
that.
Record high support for legalizing cannabis in the U.S. And I do want to say this is a whole other discussion too, but I prefer decriminalization over legalization because legalization is, putting it into the hands of the state. And yeah, some people say, well, that's how the states can grow independent is because they tax, they tax cannabis sales and then they make a lot of money and then that money goes to help build infrastructure and this and that. And hey, somebody might decide that that's the way they want to handle that. That approach. I think if you take the whole decriminalization campaign, it's just the idea that get government out of the way, get the state out of the way. And so if you choose to sniff glue, if you choose to like watch the sunset, if you choose to smoke cannabis, like you have
The point
freedom
is,
to do
if
that.
you want to drink Windex, go ahead.
Like it's your
Yeah.
body, it's your life. You're not harming somebody else. Like we might look at you and we can advise you and say, dude, you probably shouldn't drink that poison, but you should have the freedom to do so. And apparently, other Americans and people agree. We just saw that California just did recreational cannabis just a couple days ago. I think just this past week it passed. They were saying they're having like record sales like all across the country.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that. Yeah, because that was another thing. Because we know that California, unfortunately, didn't even get to really enjoy their legalization as for the period of time that like Colorado and Oregon did. Because if the feds start coming in here, there's gonna be a lot of money lost for entrepreneurs. Really, I think I read in that article it said that they, with all the permits that are pending right now that should go through, they were expected to be having $7 billion a year by 2020, which is
in
just
California.
yeah, in California, $7 billion, and that's like, I mean, that's gonna be like everything weed related. So most likely like weed bars and all these.
It's not surprising at all because like, this poll is showing 64% of Americans in 2017 approve of legalizing cannabis. That's from this poll's been going on since 1969 when it was 12%. So in the last 50 years, it's gone from 12% to nearly 3/4 of this country.
Education
Like,
is why.
well, and yeah, definitely education because those past generations they grew up under all that like reefer madness propaganda.
I'm so high I can do anything.
Like yeah, like
No,
just, your kids are gonna turn
Johnny,
into like
wait.
crazy monsters. And whatever. But so this poll, we'll go ahead and post that poll if you can find it, Jeffrey.
It's up there.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, that's. What do you guys think? Go ahead and comment below. Let us know what we are going to go,
Give us some thumbs
go
up.
through the comments at the end of the show and discuss that. So if you got any questions or things that you want us to cover or your thoughts on that, we would love to hear from you. Because I mean, it does seem like such, like just so backwards. It feels like we're not in 2018. It feels like this is 1970.
Prohibition. We're about to be in the 20s again,
yeah,
bro.
Like way back then, more like Ronald Reagan era. Like this is like the war on drugs, just say no kind of stuff. And Jeff Sessions is of that era and that time and those sort of people, so it doesn't really surprise me. But I don't think it's going to be successful. It could set up some interesting battles between states and localities versus the federal government. Will they really go in and arrest local? I mean, if that happens,
There's going to be protests.
that's like, I mean, that's like, I don't know, treasonous in some way. I'm not really one to call for like constitutional protections and things of that sort. But if the federal government's sending in their troops or their agents to come arrest your local officials, well, I think that would be time to really break away. If not, totally just sever that relationship.
Then you're
Let's
like,
just say that.
You're like, whose side am I on?
Well,
you gotta stand next to
we
your
got a
local
couple other
officials.
stories here that relate to the drug war, the drugs itself.
Oh, yeah.
And more
I'll throw
on
that
the let's say the therapy side of things, the healing side of things, because one of the other issues, now this is kind of related, right? They want to go after cannabis, right? Cannabis is a medicine that people have used to treat epilepsy, seizures. If you go to our YouTube channel, or I'll put it on our DTube channel soon, look up called Cannabis is Medicine. It's a short mini documentary we did when I traveled through California, meeting families and researchers and growers, and I met this really young lady and her mom who had to move across the country to go to California to get the oil she needed to help treat her epilepsy that was just at an insane level, having like 30 seizures a night and things of that sort. And they want to go after those type of medicines. Like their situation, it's known as being a cannabis refugee. When you have to leave your state because the laws are so restrictive and go move across, to some whole other place to try to get the medicine you need. That's what people started to call them, cannabis refugees. They want to go after that medicine, and at the same time, we have this opioid epidemic going on. There's people more than ever being prescribed to all sorts of psychotropic drugs, psychiatric drugs, opiates, and many people have lost their lives. They've lost time because they've gone to prison and hurt their bodies and their minds because of not just heroin, but then the things they prescribe to you to get off the heroin. They give you Suboxone, they give you fentanyl, they give you all these really, really dangerous drugs that people get hooked on even worse. And it's a horrible thing to see. Well, this one article that you're looking at right now, it says, "An end to the opioid epidemic, new studies suggest ibogaine treatment could be a game changer." Now, some of you may have heard of ibogaine. It's a naturally occurring psychoactive compound which is extracted from this bark, which is found in Central Africa. It's used by the Bwiti tribe of Gabon, and they basically have used it, for generations. We don't really know exactly how long, and it's also found in different places. Of course, it's illegal in the United States. It's listed as a Schedule I drug, meaning that it apparently has a high abuse potential and no medical value, according to the United States government, which, in case you didn't know, they still classify cannabis as that. They still say that even, their own studies admit that it treats cancer, but they still list it as a schedule where it's no medical value, which is why you can't really get access to it, and which is why this guy wants to go after it. So in some countries, though, including New Zealand, Mexico, Bahamas, Canada, Australia, Spain, Brazil, Costa Rica, and South Africa, ibogaine treatment is currently used in clinical and medical contexts for treating substance abuse disorders. Specifically, it's been very effective with opiate and heroin addicts. And in many cases, people, they report never going back to drugs, and in some cases, individuals stay off of them for much longer than, trying traditional treatments and going to treatment centers. In one study, it says a retrospective ibogaine study, the majority of individuals, 80%, experienced a drastic reduction or elimination of their withdrawal symptoms from opiates, and 41% reported sustained abstinence from opioids at the time of their survey, which meant that they stayed free from opiates for 6 months or more after those trials, and some of them never went back. And it's apparently a very powerful medicine. As I said, it's been used by the indigenous people in Africa for quite some time now, and we still don't know, as far as the Western world and Western medical science, they still don't necessarily understand how it works exactly and what it's doing. But there are more and more studies coming out there, not just with ibogaine, but in general, we're seeing this renaissance of psychedelic research where medicines like MDMA and LSD and psilocybin mushrooms and these beautiful tools that are really, I think, gifts, and a tool. I say tools because a tool can be abused, and it can be used in the proper way that can actually promote growth and learning and understanding. These tools now are getting studied again, and we literally might be able to be in a position where you can go to your therapist and get prescribed MDMA within 2 to 3 years, because of the hard work of groups like MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, who've worked for years to do this great work, and plenty of other people. They are some of the people who fund the research and the studies by Johns Hopkins universities and some other universities who focused on looking at how does psilocybin affect depression, how do these things, can they treat nicotine addiction, and we're seeing great success, and at least some indicators that psilocybin can treat nicotine addiction, that MDMA can treat depression, that LSD and MDMA and mushrooms can be useful for end-of-life illnesses for people to help them relieve their anxiety, as well as just for therapeutic to help people release traumas. And things like ibogaine can be useful for treating addiction. So we have so many medicines here that have been gifted to us by this planet, and cannabis itself that we mentioned as well. And the article here that we're looking at, it's from a great website called Psychedelic Times. You can see the headlines: cannabis, psilocybin, MDMA, DMT, iboga, ayahuasca, combo, rapa, kratom, ketamine, LSD. They look at all these different psychedelic medicines, and they look at studies and the science behind it, and it's really great information. So check that one out. Do you have any experience with these substances? Anybody ever tried ibogaine or had a family member who had a heroin addiction or an opiate addiction and pursued ibogaine research or pursued ibogaine medicine? Let us know, comment below, and if you have had some experience, I would love to hear about it. And I'm actually interested in interviewing some of the leading researchers on that soon, so if you have any contacts or anything like that, please do let us know. And what are your thoughts? Should we pursue these medicines, Or, do you think that they're possibly dangerous? I know there's a mix of opinions sometimes on these issues. For me, it's quite clear that, again, cognitive liberty, people should have the freedom to do so, and these are medicines that have been demonized, and I believe because they are very, very powerful, they're very, very powerful tools to help us set ourselves free in a lot of different ways. Then what is, you had one, right? You wanted to get into psychiatric.
Yes.
Johnny's going to take over for a minute and cover a story he wrote recently for Organic Titanic.
Cool. I'm just flashing over to the view so you can kind of see my headline. I wrote this article for Organic Titanic. I can't remember exactly when. A couple months ago maybe. But it kind of hit me hard because I was like, I read this headline somewhere else and I tried to look more into it. Just over 1 million U.S. children age 6 or under are on psychiatric drugs. So let's just think about that for a second. Because, whatever your need, I had my first anxiety attack ever in 2017. And so I started to have a little bit more of an empathy for people. I didn't understand what physical things actually come along with that. So I'm not trying to say that these medicines are completely useless or that I'm completely against them or something. If they're used in the correct manner, I'm not a big fan of Big Pharma, but I do understand that these are tools that people do use and stuff like. It's not fun. It's not fun being super anxious. But here's the question: really, is at what age should we really define these diseases and things like this? Like, we got a grand total of 1,146,530 children. Oh, these are the ages 5 and under are taking these drugs. And these drugs are known to affect the development in children. And, kind of that's what they do. They change your chemistry in your brain. So, obviously, during very early years in your development, maybe even before you're, at least 16 or 18 or, even a little bit later, 20, might have more use for these. Are you playing with this, Fred?
Fred's in the show.
You gotta love Fred. But, really just think about this. So, your kid is, 4 years old. Or, damn near, look at this. 0 to 1 years, 274,000 children are on psychiatric drugs. From being 0 to 1. So you're going to tell me your newborn baby came to you and said that he's depressed? How the fuck do you diagnose that? Like, I don't know how else to say that. Like, how do you tell me that your 6-month-old has anxiety or something like that? Like, they can't even say the word anxiety, and so 2 to 3, there's 300,070 kids that are on these drugs, and 4 to 5 is 500,000. 500,000 4 to 5-year-olds. I don't even think that you're in grade school at that point. Are you? Like, I think I went to grade school when I was 7, So these kids are just learning everything, they can barely read or write, but yet we're prescribing them antidepressants and all different kinds of everyone's laughing at Fred.
Fred needs to be on some.
They're asking if it's a rat or a mouse.
We need.
Fred is a better antidepressant than probably most of those
He
other
needs some
drugs out there.
Xanax. He just needs to chill out.
But
Johnny, they're asking where are you getting the numbers from?
where am I getting the numbers from? I wrote this article a little
Post
while
it.
ago. You can check. Yeah, we're gonna post the article in
I'll find out.
in the feed. We actually just threw this on last minute, so we didn't have it ready to go post. But all my sources are in there. There's a little video there too. Oops. Yeah, I'll link it right after this. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit is, like, obviously you see the commercials for these drugs, and they have a whole freaking laundry list of side effects, including suicidal thoughts, abnormal bleedings, cardiovascular disorder, aggression, liver damage, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And people are giving these drugs with those possible side effects to, newborn babies who are supposedly depressed or I want to know who these doctors are that are diagnosing this, or these, I guess, would it even be a psychiatrist? Can you even take your 6-month-old to a psychiatrist? Is that a thing?
So we got Emily commenting, said parents are also not willing to admit their role in illnesses, i.e. what they are feeding their children.
Yes.
Yeah,
Doctors
exactly.
educate and they medicate.
Is
Yeah.
there any,
That's a very good point.
Miriam had a question. Come on.
is there any studies on how these drugs are affecting these children in the long term because they're in the development stages of their life. So how is it affecting their
So,
brain? Their
I'm not
body?
If
sure.
you can't hear me, just repeat it. 'Cause it
Okay, yeah. She said is if there's any studies,
long-term studies.
yeah, long-term studies showing like actually what these 1-year-olds are ending up planning or being personality-wise. You know, maybe when they're fully
How
grown,
is it
18.
affecting their brains
But-
and their organs and their development?
Yeah, I haven't seen any studies on that. I still think that these numbers are probably fairly new. Yeah, 2012 is when this is posted. So if it was a newborn baby getting this drugs in 2012, he would only be 4, probably still on the prescription. Huh?
You split.
Yeah, you're split. You're on the screen, bud.
So the thing I want to say about that, as far as Miriam's question is, is there long-term studies? We have to recognize that really, this pharmaceutical age that we're living in is, I mean, like modern medicine is maybe just over 100 years old or so, like the way that we know it. But the pills and all this kind of stuff, like this is the last 50 years, and maybe even less, 25 or so. I mean,
Yeah, so
I definitely remember being a little kid and not seeing so many freaking prescription commercials and pharmaceutical commercials all over TV. Like that's like a norm now. Like every magazine is filled with these things, and they're all over TV. And so it's really just, it's like I think it's become a part of the culture. And like Emily was saying, there's people who are parents who aren't asking questions. Like I was actually asking my mom recently because they had me taking all these allergy medicines when I was younger. The doctors said I was sick of all kinds of things. And now I kind of feel like, as I'm older, I'm like, man, what were they giving me? And I asked my mom, and
Yeah.
she's like, well, I asked some questions, but she kind of, I wasn't trying to like attack or anything, but she was just like, just basically said that they trust the doctor, which is I think most parents, they trust the doctors.
You get scared, especially if you have a newborn baby, right? Like if you have a newborn baby, say it's your first kid, these doctors are probably going to be able to scare you into giving your kid damn near anything if they tell you, like, oh my God, what's wrong with my kid? Like, let me fix this. And their intentions are probably 100% good as far as like when they're from the information that they've received, like they're trying to do the best they can. So I'm not, if you are a parent out there whose child is on these medicines, maybe comment your experience on it or why they are, but
yeah, definitely. This is not meant to be an attack on parents.
Not an attack on parents. I honestly more of an attack on doctors, because
the people who are taking money who are working with these corporations, I would say.
What kind of PhD guy? Yeah, sorry.
Well, there's already a lot of studies on like the effects of the depression drugs on adults and their brains and their just their whole bodies really. And so I would just be really scared to know how these babies are being affected really. And then also there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of studies now of lifestyle changes that are helping people come off with these drugs and stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know if these doctors are aware of that.
Yeah, no, I think that there are probably many doctors who are aware of the role that health in general plays, but as some people have commented, really, I mean, the pharmaceutical industry is big pharma. They're not only tied in with the government, they're tied in with the doctors themselves. And, people have all sort of anecdotal stories about, doctors prescribing them like medicine, like pills, depression pills, and psychotropic drugs without knowing anything about them, without knowing their history, and with very little testing. And I've had that happen to me before when I was having health problems. They told me I was depressed, and they handed me a box of Lexapro and told me to start taking that. And I basically refused to do it because my buddy had the same thing happen with him, and he said that it made him have fits of anger and just like rage sometimes. So
it can cause a chemical imbalance.
Yeah,
for sure.
I just refused to do it, and I kind of just whatever. But my point is, because I want us to get into this last story. We're going to try to keep this at an hour. But the point is that this situation, because we started talking about cannabis, right? We're talking about there's a medicine that is available that could grow everywhere and could be freely given to people and used for all sorts of different purposes, and it's cannabis, right? There's things like ibogaine, that can treat opiate addiction and other forms of addiction. There's all these different types of medicines, and instead we are given a culture that promotes psychiatric medicine, psychotropic, that these atrocious numbers that Johnny was talking about, that children 5 years old and younger being prescribed
over 1 million.
Over 1 million children are being prescribed all kinds of medicines. And the point is that the more education we have, the more we empower ourselves, and we're able to live healthier lives and not need to rely on these things. Because I think that's the other case is, well, why are people going to the doctors looking for answers? Why are they needing to seek treatments for the problems, where the problem's coming from. You know, start going at the root, striking the root of all these things, and seeing, okay, well, maybe they're not eating very healthy, or maybe they're, you know, there's a lot of different things, and not getting into hereditary issues and things of that sort, but generally lifestyle. I think a lot of it comes down to lifestyle and education, and that's the way we can empower ourselves. So let's get into this last one, Johnny. You read a little bit of it. It's kind of interesting. I found it the other day. I didn't get to totally explore it, but it seemed
See if I
right
can
up my
find
alley.
this.
It's called A Neuroscientist Explores the Sanskrit Effect. MRI
Got it.
scans show that memorizing ancient mantras increase the size of brain regions associated with cognitive function. So what do we got here?
Yeah, so everyone can see the headline there. Basically, they're showing that, you know, these the people chanting these mantras all in unison, and I mean these are not just like some like simple like Hare Krishna mantras. These are like 40,000 to 100,000 words. These people are memorizing from an ancient language, saying them all together, all in the same tone. This is very it's a very sophisticated thing. These people are practicing this.
It takes 6 hours for them to do the whole
Yeah,
thing.
six freaking hours to just recite it, you know. So you could imagine, and in the end, there's kind of like an anecdote where, you know, some of the practicers were just they were reciting a mantra, and they stopped, and they're like, and he goes, "Why'd you stop?" And they're like, "Oh, we messed up just one word a little bit," and they said, "Oh, well, you don't have to stop for me," and they're like, "No, we're stopping for us." So they do take it very seriously. And what the study basically showed, they hooked these guys up to a MRI machine, which can show your brain patterns using magnets, and it actually showed that it increased the gray matter in the brain by 10%, which is very significant. And if you don't know what gray matter is, that's I just learned this as well. It's a pretty fancy anatomy term, but it's the part of your brain that controls that involves with muscle control and your sensory perception. So these guys are gaining the part of their brain, 10% more of their brain that affects their hearing, their memory, their emotions, their speech, decision-making skills, and self-control. So just think about that. Like, and I thought the decision-making and self-control was particularly interesting because these people are very disciplined.
Yeah, so it says here, through the India Trento Partnership for Advanced Research, we recruited professional Vedic Pandits from several government-sponsored schools in Delhi. Then we used structural magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, at India's National Brain Research Center to scan their brains in controls matched for age, gender, handedness, eye dominance, and multilingualism. And he goes on to describe, he says, what we discovered was remarkable. You know, and going into, as Johnny said, the growth of gray matter and these sort of things. And this goes into some other studies that I found that don't deal specifically with mantras themselves, but that studies about meditation, which have found also an increase in gray matter in the brain. So it's interesting how these focus, because I would say mantras is another form of meditation. There's, depending on the type of meditation, especially something Eastern like this, often mantras are repeated. So it could be something maybe not as intensive as this, but it's that mantra. I've read some different books that have basically compared it to like whether you're drumming or you're repeating like a mantra or you're bringing your breath back to center. It's that repetition. After a while, your brain goes into like a very deep state. And I guess perhaps
to memorize 40,000 words, your brain is not like you're not thinking very hard about that. Yeah, you're basically just like you just know it. It's kind of like knowing how to play a song, you know, without thinking about it. So I also wanted to mention there's probably a lot of other ways that you could achieve that same gray matter growth through memorization or through practicing like something that you're just super into. I think that's probably going to be really connected. Like maybe even like a dancer or something who memorizes like a whole ballet, and you have to think of an hour worth of choreography, but you know that's probably like affecting the same parts of your brain. That's just a hypothesis of mine, but
so maybe it's I don't know. It's more to do with like the concentration and the focus that we're putting in that you can gain through states like meditation and these other sort of things. I don't know, but I would definitely check out that article. It's from Scientific American, which I have my issues with Scientific American on some things. They do take more of what I would consider to be a scientism view. But on this is really interesting stuff here. It's coming from James Hartzell, who is a researcher at the Basque Center on Cognition, Brain, and Language in Spain. And that's definitely some interesting stuff. So, yeah, those are pretty much the most important stories of the week that I've been covering. I also wrote one other article that I will mention that it's not really a particular news item so much as an editorial piece directed at some of you out there who may consider yourself to be part of the truth, freedom movements, liberty movements, different things out there. Those of you who are out there looking at what's going on in the world and you don't trust the mainstream, deadstream corporate media, you don't trust the politicians, you know are worried about what's happening with corporations and these sort of things, and so you're looking for answers, and so you start turning to independent and alternative media, and you start finding answers, and you start working with other people, and then for some reason along the lines, you started to believe that Donald Trump was the answer. And you saw it happen to other people. You saw some people get deceived and fall for Obama and this idea that he was going to come along and be the savior. And then maybe you saw some people fall for it and think that, Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. And for whatever reason, you're like, wow, I can't believe, that those people fell for that. But they don't understand Donald Trump is anti-establishment and this and that. Well, I wrote this article for Activist Post, and it's called When Will the Truth Freedom Movement Realize They've Been Duped by Donald Trump? And it looks into that. And what it does, it's not just talking crap to those of you who believe that. If you're still there, just give me a moment. It's actually 4 reasons that are valid, factual, not fake news, reasons and information that you should not support Donald Trump. And those are all stories you've heard here before, so I'm not going to really rehash that. I will post the link here myself. We weren't really planning on covering this, but I do think it's worth mentioning. It's actually called When Will Trump Supporters in the Freedom Movement Realize They Were Duped? And the 4 things that we talk about in this article, the borders turning to a surveillance and police state, the Trump administration supports the deep state through things like the FISA courts, a secret court that you should know about. They've been detaining an American citizen for over 3 months without a trial or access to a lawyer, and it's very dangerous. If you allow it to happen to one person, it can happen to all of us. And the Trump administration is continuing and expanding the drone kill list, the secret kill list. Yes, in case you didn't know, presidents have kill lists that Obama started. 4 reasons, just 4, there's plenty more, that show that he is more of the same. So if any of you are out there hanging on to some kind of hope or belief that the new boss is going to be different than the old boss, please give that article a look, and I appreciate your time. I just posted the link, guys. Go ahead and check that out. Jeffrey, did you see any other comments or things that we should talk about? I know I want to just scroll through here and say thank you to Jennifer and to John up in Michigan. Brandon said, I was on ADD medicine all my childhood life. It's chemically similar to crystal meth. That's very true. I tried both, very similar effects. Breaks my heart to give these kids these harmful drugs. Yeah, man, it's pretty disturbing, and it's unfortunate, but a lot of us have experiences with these kind of things. Looks like we got a troll. Shout out to our troll, Daniel. And Emily, thank you for commenting and letting us know your perspective. Emily, you're a mother, so it's always nice to have a parent's comment in and to hear other people's opinions. And thank you, Cody, for checking in and hanging out with us today. And I guess we'll give it a minute to catch up, and if there are no other questions, then we'll be done for today. And I want to remind you guys that you can support me and through me support this organization on a monthly basis via patreon.com/Derrick Broze if you want to sign up for as little as $1 a month, or if you want to get past all that, and you can just sign up on steemit.com and make yourself an account, start getting active on there, supporting people like myself who create content, and through that we all make cryptocurrency and we'll better our lives and improve each other. We'll get away from centralized platforms such as Facebook. Possibly next week this will be broadcast using DLive if I can figure it out, or some other decentralized platform. But we will still share on Facebook for as long as people are on Facebook until you finally let go and just give up this thing. Because I already feel like it, as I'm shifting towards Steemit and I see more and more people, I feel like I'm on MySpace now. Like, honestly, I mean, maybe that's a little more extreme at this point, but I really feel like Facebook is dying. Like, for people who really, truly want a platform that is going to reward them, not in just the sense of social interaction, but monetarily and other forms, like something that's engaging. I don't think it's Facebook. I really don't see that happening, and it was at one point, but they've done their best to destroy what was a great platform. They want people to pay for it, and I don't think we should do that. So if you're interested in new platforms, check out steemit.com, check out minds.com even, check out freedomcells.org. That's one other thing I do want to mention, freedomcells.org and mutual aid networks. I can't remember the exact website, but do we have those links up still?
I've got it.
Yeah, so these are 2 websites. I just want to mention this, and then I guess we'll be out of here. But for those of you who are interested in getting involved in a community level, because I don't just sit here and talk about news. We don't talk about these things to put fear in our hearts and our minds, but to focus on solutions and how we can help each other. This website you're looking at right here is called Mutual Aid Networks. What's the full site?
I just switched back.
Okay.
There you go.
What's the full address though?
mutualaidnetwork.map.mutualaidnetwork.com.
Okay, we just posted it there. So that one, mutualaidnetwork.org, is similar to my
Sorry
website,
about that.
freedomcells.org. Both of them are geared towards helping you
There's
find individuals in your community. Check out Mutual Aid Network. I just found it recently. Somebody contacted me through there. But the goal of both of them is to find individuals in your communities, to get together, to form small groups, mutual aid support groups, freedom cells, whatever you want to call them, start organizing locally, decentralize, unplug, opt out from systems that don't serve you and your values, and start creating those that do. And we can do that. We can focus on supporting technology and platforms that are promoting our values and opting out of those that don't. Not just social media, not just purchasing power with your dollar and where you shop and things like that, but think about where and who you allow to govern you. How about we decide to do that for ourselves? Take some of our energy and our time and learn what it means to be personally responsible for our own actions and for our own lives. All right, guys, that's all I got for you this week. I very much appreciate your time and your energy. I hope you guys have a great weekend. And remember, we're here every Friday, 5:30 Central, on the Conscious Resistance Network. You can find us also on DTube, YouTube, Steemit, Twitter, Tumblr. Does anybody even use Tumblr anymore? I got it.
Yeah, I never did.
Instagram. We're on Instagram. All that stuff too. Cool. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy your night. Remember, you are powerful. You are beautiful. You are free. Peace.